You often hear religious people claim that objective morality exists, and they use this to argue for the existence of God. I want to tackle this claim for two reasons. Number one, objective morality does not exist. And two, if objective morality existed, pain and suffering would increase drastically. While the latter does not really undermine the actuality of objective morality, it does shine a light on the way we should view it, and possibly on its creator. But before I start ranting on objective morality, I do need to point out that I myself am a moral realist. By beginning, I probably have to define first what objective morality is. To me, because it is objective, and thus independent of individual feelings and opinions, it describes actions which are applicable to all humans under all circumstances. Actions like killing, torturing, raping are always wrong, while loving and kindness are always right. It seems so obvious that these actions are that these statements are true, and that objective morality has so many proponents. But if we look deeper into the matter and do not just take these simple examples of how to act, this objectivity of moral actions has big problems. The reason is that these values, almost per definition, cannot be argued for, ever. Due to the simple fact that morality, under the assumption that it is supposed to enhance human well-being in some way, if argued for, must acknowledge the difference which exists from human being to human being, concerning motivations, desires, fears, and so on. And thus it must necessarily be different to some extent, from person to person. We cannot understand why we should act a certain way if morality is objective, because we cannot reason through why this action should be taken. Moral values must therefore be either a gut feeling, or must come from revelation of some sort. If the former is the case, then each adherent of the concept of morality thinks his gut feeling represents the right moral action, and because every person is different, there will always be a difference in opinion between people on a controversial moral issue. And therefore it can never be settled, since both believe that their idea of the right moral actions are inalterably correct. If the latter is the case, that moral values come from revelation, then, while there won't be any conflicts which action is right, in an ideal case of course, the action itself will tend to lead to the great deal of pain for some people. The reason is that the revealer completely ignores the obvious difference between each action, between each person with regards to fears, desires, and motivations. He indirectly provokes them to disobey him by intentionally creating them with a certain personality which conflicts with his moral teachings. These teachings necessarily undermine the very reason of morality, namely human, if not more than just that, well-being. By those standards of what morality should consist of, the very creator of moral values is a prick, or at least questionable. And given that we have no way of knowing whether this was in fact a kind and loving creator in the first place, we must question his revelation. But coming back to moral objectivity per se, I doubt it for the simple reason that it contradicts the very purpose of morality itself, because a rule which applies universally for everyone cannot take into consideration the consequences of this rule on every single person, and thus cannot maximize the well-being for a very large number. My denial of objective morality does not contradict with my beliefs in moral realism though, because while moral realism thinks there is always the best action under every circumstance, it acknowledges the important difference between each human being, and thus which actions need to be taken. And this can change through reasoning, information, and so forth. And just to make it clear, moral realism does not imply in any way that people who unknowingly act according to information which does not fit with a certain situation, and thus do not act morally, that they should be punished according to the information at hand after the action was taken. To the contrary, it rather implies that you judge people according to the knowledge they could have had in this situation, and that implies the knowledge they are capable of having. Because after all, not having information at the time, deciding to act a certain way, counts as information for the person judging him. Ignoring it would ruthlessly violate the very standard moral realism is trying to follow. But now I think I have to end this video because I can't avoid ranting. But anyway, thanks for watching, and if you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. But I think that's it.